welcome. This House supports the right of citizen journalism in media, where citizen journalism means enabling the general public to play a more active role in sharing news and their perspectives. In the status quo, the big corporates have the power to share biased ideas and to share biased ideas in both traditional and social media, where they can push a political agenda and narrative. And the public can only depend on these sources for their information, and there's no variety in perspectives. By allowing individuals to share their outlook on ongoing events, it creates a greater variety of ideas rather than allowing big companies to control the views of the public. Our model is to create a non-profit platform funded by the government where individuals can publish opinions and views and allowing the public to decide what they believe is true by using commentary rules. People taking information from this platform will have to use their own judgment carefully. As right now, media is dominated by big companies. Yeah.
Do you think that at the point at which we already have an unprecedented level of polarization, it's a bit unfair to say that there's no diversity in media?
The current media, like social media, is very unreliable. And by creating this platform where everyone knows that it is where you can share your opinion, but by allowing the general public to decide what they think is true, creates a more reliable source of a variety of perspectives. And as I mentioned, the media is dominated by big companies where they can push a political agenda. By allowing the public to decide what they collectively believe is true will create more trusted variety of perspectives. Moreover, as social media is the main source of information for young people, by creating this platform, it gives them a more suitable solution to gain their information. As the traditional TV information and the unreliable social media can both push political agendas. And this model will not only help young people, but also reach other age groups through TV broadcasting and websites, so everyone can gain fair news. Moreover, in big companies, money means power to alter opinions, where investors can potentially hold power in changing what they believe is true. And in social media, there's algorithms where it pushes you in a certain direction. But by eliminating the algorithm, it forces you to take in different perspectives and to be exposed to more ideas. And as this is a nonprofit that is funded by the government, the donation and government funds will eliminate the power of investors to hold the power to change the information. Yeah.
Why would the government want to fund this NGO in the first place?
To create more variety, allowing the public to have a say in what they believe is true, rather than just allowing the big companies to decide what the public thinks. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Prime Minister. Let's now welcome Leader of Opposition and start the off case. Here.
Raise my phone for time. I think one huge glaring argument on proposition's case is that they're actually supporting opposition. So proud to oppose. First, some clarifications on framing. We would like to say that journalism is an active reporting on current events. And ideally, this is factual and nonpartisan, though we know this may not always occur. We also state that currently we do have large traditional media companies like CNN and New York Times and The Guardian, etc., that, as Proposition did point out, are what we would normally consider traditional media. However, we would also like to say, Proposition does take a narrow view when they talk about when they talk about big corporations, and we'd also like to state traditional journalism also includes smaller, independent journal companies like Vox, like Channel 11, that perhaps don't fit their narrow definition of a big conglomerate corporation would look like. We'll come back to get into this later. Secondly, we would like to say that the difference between citizen journalism and traditional journalism is that citizen journalisms are not a company, meaning they are not held to the same ethical standards, and nor do they have the same backing that traditional companies do. This is what we're against. We understand there's going to be a pool of information that people actually read, and we don't want citizen journalism to be in this pool, but we agree that it can still exist outside of this. Then I'd like to point out their model. Proposition comes up and tells us that they would like the government to fund a platform for citizen journalism. 2 points. I think my third speaker, Kabir, did point out with a good POI why would the government want to fund this. Proposition's stance is very heavily set in a democratic society. But we can, for number one, for non-democratic societies or societies which have huge political polarization, I agree with Kabir's point that they did not adequately address why the government would want to fund this in the first place. I'll take that later. If the government would likely want to fund media that is supportive of them, and we see this even in democratic societies, I think the most glaring example is the US, where we already see a huge partisanship in news media at this point. The government isn't going to be willing to fund this out of nowhere. My second point is that their model is that this is actually a traditional media company. By supporting this, citizen journalism will have to adhere to a certain set of standards that, under the definition, citizen journalism is not. By taking public and allowing them to have a voice on this hypothetical government platform, they no longer are citizen journalists, they're simply journalists because, as I already said before, they have the backing and they have ethical standards and review boards that they will have to adhere to be able to publish their work. Yes, what is your POI?
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to our first substantive, is that there will be a lower quality of work with citizen journalism. I'd like to here set up an example. Suppose there's a huge, say, concert, and a person witnesses a car crash afterwards. Citizen journalism, under this instance, will look like a person pulling out their phone and immediately suggesting, oh, because there's a concert and because people were drinking, this was a drunk car crash, and people taking that as a fact surrounding them. We want to note that there's a difference between citizen journalism and sharing your opinions online, because opinions are normally a reaction to journalism itself. On the other hand, established journalism in this stance would be going through proper ethical standards to make sure sensitive information is being, monitored, that there's factual reporting, we know who did this, and that no one is directly harmed in the reporting of this, that citizen journalism just simply does not have to go through. As we can see through this example, there is a lower quality of information put out. Just because they don't, as I was repeatedly stating, there's no reason for citizen journalists to adhere to a higher quality of work. There's also deeper reasons behind this. Because they don't have these standards to adhere to, citizen journalism is also more applicable to manipulation. They don't have, they need, citizen journalism are also not immune to funding. They need to pay their bills too. they are more applicable to manipulation also because they are just working solo here. They don't have a series of people they have to push their work through to be able to get it published. Furthermore, we'd also like to state that because journalism is such a competitive industry, to get attention and to get sponsors or to get viewers, citizen journalism is just inherently more likely to push polarizing content out because it gets more views and it gets more interaction from the people. And like furthermore, as I've already stated, they are working alone. There's no fact checking. Bias is inherently inevitable, but in this case, it's biased without consideration of the other side that we typically find in traditional news sources. And they no one is checking them if they have falsified this information. And as a whole, this just has a negative impact on journalism industry together, because if citizen journalism is bringing down the name or making people question the reputability of traditional journalism, it's just negative to the entire industry itself. Furthermore, our second substantive is there are ethical harms. As I stated before, these journalists do not have to adhere to the ethical standards. They do not have to protect sensitive information. This was a huge issue with journalism related to true crime, was that they were just being so incredibly invasive in people's lives, yet there was no, because they had no standards to adhere to. Furthermore, citizen journalism, even if these cases are brought to court, they have different standards that they apply to, and they also don't have the backing of big corporations. So, they themselves are putting themselves in harm's way. We like to put on our side, we still have diverse viewpoints from citizens when we have opinion articles under published news sites. Because this is not citizen journalism, because as I said, it's published under an acceptable news source. So we still have diversity of thought, we still have independent, smaller news journalism reporting on less structured events, but simply our information is better quality and more reputable. Thank you so much, so proud to oppose.
All right, thank you. Let's now welcome February Prime Minister. Hey here.
All right, so first of all, I want to start off with clarifying the fact-checking. The opposition briefly talked about fact-checking, and we want to clarify that this nonprofit that would be created to bring citizen journalism would have a fact-checking system using majority of citizens would allow. If, let's say if there was a certain topic and someone posted about it and it was false, there will be a system where citizens will be able to report this, and if a majority of citizens thinks that this thing is false, it will be taken down. And just to create a kind of fact-checking system therefore. And second of all, you're talking about traditional media and that this nonprofit would be traditional media. We're saying that this wouldn't be the case because this is a nonprofit and we wouldn't be pushing any political agenda at all. And actually, we would want to allow multiple perspectives because traditional... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. POI. Under your definition, would The Guardian not be considered a traditional news media source? Because as you stated, Guardian is a nonprofit.
But as I was about to say, they usually push a one-sided political agenda, and this NGO, we would want multiple opinions from both the conservative side and the liberal side, which The Guardian tends to not do most of the time, but there is exceptions. All right, now to move on to the points we want to talk about. This motion, the first speaker Adelaide said, can help reach younger audiences, and this is shown by how majority of young people use social media. That's exactly what Adelaide said, and this platform would really ease the gap of younger audiences looking into media and journalism, as right now the House believes that this is not the case and young people aren't looking at journalism. So creating a platform could help erase this because people might feel more comfortable to go onto this platform and share their opinions and look at other multiple perspectives.
POI.
Go ahead.
is the only difference between your platform and Reddit that it's a nonprofit?
Also that there's fact checking, as our nonprofit would be like have fact checking. But and anyways, to move on, we would want to talk about the younger audiences. Yeah, it would just ease the gap. And secondly, traditional media, usually these big companies, these conglomerates, they have investors that usually push their own ideas and what they should think happened with this company because it's all for profit. They usually want money. So creating these polarization is usually what the investors want to try to create this revenue and income. And our nonprofit wouldn't do this and would try to get rid of this polarization that currently exists. All right, to move on, we also want to talk more about the new outlooks, like to be more clear about the big corporations, because right now a small amount of people really control the majority of journalism, such as you guys were talking about, The Guardian, CNN, Fox News. And yeah, we feel like creating this nonprofit would create a bigger pool of people that would share their own ideas instead of just a small amount of people.
POI,
Go ahead.
can you give more reasoning to why your news source would break the big conglomerate of traditional news sources? Like, how is this any different than Twitter or Reddit or other social media platforms?
I think, the House thinks, the House thinks that would break this because Twitter and Reddit, like we said, Twitter has gotten rid of most of their fact checking, and our nonprofit would use fact checking to like create a clear society, I think, and clear opinions. And this platform would just be for putting out opinions. And Twitter and Reddit is used for many purposes, including just posting random things. And we would want to be clearly just for journalism. I think I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Speaker. Let's now welcome the Leader of Opposition here.
Okay, I would like to start today by first drawing a distinction between what our world versus their world looks like. To begin with, in our world, we're not saying that opinions aren't there, perspectives aren't there. We're not shutting those down, but those aren't characterized as journalism. In our world, journalism is characterized as reporting on current events. This is the distinction we are drawing between claim and opinion. Take this as an example. A car crash takes place. You're a citizen and you take a video. A big concert took place that night, so your assumption is that someone must have gone drunk, they were driving, and you post that online, and that becomes your assessment of the events that you post and report on. That is the distinction we're drawing. The minute you report on that event and other public starts to believe that yes, that is what's happened, it's an incident of drunk driving that has taken place outside of a concert, that becomes journalism that is now false and was done by citizens. The distinction in our world is if it was an opinion, more like a citizen posting, oh, we think this might have taken place. This is where we draw that distinction of what they're saying is that our world shuts down perspective. It doesn't shut down perspective. It rephrases perspective as being op-eds, as opinion pieces, as Asha pointed out, as comments on journalism, not journalism itself. So then moving into a little bit of reconstruction of our argument that my first speaker made. Firstly, the proposition has yet to interact with our point about lower quality of sources. Yes, we do agree that in their world there will be availability of information, there will be perspectives, but the quality of those perspectives is not the same level at all. Having professionals come up there, I'll take that later. Having professionals come on there and make these points versus having citizens come and give their perspectives of events is not marginally the same thing. In our world, the marginal quality of these resources will be better. It is these journalism resources that students use in education systems to learn from. It is this journalism that we learn from on a daily basis. So if you say that the quality doesn't matter as much, that's false. The second point that Asha came and made was about the ethical aspect of journalism. Putting citizens out there, telling them to come, they don't know the guidelines. There's a certain method to the madness of journalism. You can't just go in there, take videos or whatever you want, post it online. We think that having citizens go, feel free to journal around, that will disrupt these kind of ethical guidelines that have been put in place. Then moving into a few rebuttals from their first speaker's speech. The first speaker came on here and said that there's no variety in perspectives, so we want this platform where people can post their perspectives. We brought this up throughout our PIOs, is that what you are describing is essentially social media. People coming on there, putting their perspectives, it's loose, and the majority of the people decide whether it's false or true. That is exactly what social media is. You come on there, there's freedom, you decide whether, yes, we think it's true, no, we think it's false, and it's a majority opinion. You also say that because there is this majority opinion, because people can come on there and kind of come to a consensus of whether it's true or not, that would lead to more credibility in the source. However, this is not true. People weren't there. It doesn't matter whether I was there like the night of the car crash or not. If I wasn't there and I hear you think, oh, like if someone is saying it very confidently, echo chambers are perpetuated. And this is the problem we're referring to when we're saying that the credibility doesn't exist. I'll take that PIO now.
Are large corporations more reliable than a large amount of people to verify a source?
If the large corporations have professionals that are vetted, that have been taught how to journal, and they were present at the site, then 100% they are more reliable than a citizen that was just there. Okay, moving on to pushing this argument about perspectives. Justifying this new platform, we aren't shutting down perspectives. As I've said earlier, as I came out in my start and said, opinions aren't the same. Majority of citizens will judge the credibility, but they won't know what happened, and so this shuts down most of their points on the other side, even taking them as the best case, that this platform works, that the platform has some credibility, and that the government in the first place funds something that might just lead to the perpetuation of negative echo chambers for the government. To think that yes, in an ideal world where we do have a democracy functioning, there is a chance that the government would fund something like this. But in the real world, there is a chance that these kind of systems would just perpetuate negative echo chambers against the government. So having the government come out there and fund this non-profit organization that might just lead to misinformation, lead to panic amongst their own citizens is unlikely. For the government to come out there and do such a thing that is uncredible, unreliable, giving news to their citizens and making them panic, having the citizens come on there, all these things I think are highly unlikely, which is why their argument and their alternative world does not stand. Finally, I'm going to present our third substantive on the fact that we think this weakens the industry. Having citizens come weakens the journalism industry for a few reasons. One, as we pointed out, there's be a lower quality of resources. As the quality of resources decreases, the citizens' trust they have in journalism will also go down. Overall, we think that this will lead to the decrease in the demand of journalism as an input to getting knowledge of stuff. People would rather watch the event unfold or be there than trust what's happening online because the credibility that once existed no longer does. As the demand for journalism increases, we think this will be, at the same time, the supply for it will be increasing. Because everyone can come and journal, because everyone can come and post something online, the supply of journalists will be increasing. And this kind of like contradiction in the equilibrium of this demand going down and the supply of journalism going up will overall lead journalism companies to lose their credibility. We think this will eventually lead in employment loss. So a lot of these big organizations like BBC, like CNN, when they are no longer required, when they are no longer trusted, we think that over time that this will lead to employment loss for them. This will lead them to collapse. So on this side, the outcome is that the companies will be worse off, the journalists will be worse off, and the public will be worse off if we say that citizens can come and start reporting anything they want. And we think this will lead to loss of money for the industry. For all these reasons, I'm so proud to propose.
All right, thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition. Let's now welcome President Wick to be here.
Nowadays, citizens can choose between 3 types of information. They can either get their information from social media, which is unreliable, often not fact-checked, and often owned even by large corporations. For example, like Twitter, which is owned by Elon Musk, who is a direct affiliate to Trump at the moment. Then there's a traditional journalism, which is a very prevailing argument by the opposition. Traditional journalism, for example, the ABC channel, which is not an extreme example like the opposition mentioned, like Fox News, is owned by the Disney Corporation. The Disney Corporation has actively caved into Trump's demands with the Jimmy Kimmel cancellation, just a few weeks ago actually. The question begs, how far does this go? How far does this go that big corporations can push their agenda, can push their opinions that are basically just for profit, that are basically for more clicks and more advertisement views and more power and more control in today's world until it gets too much? How far can government reach go in these different companies?
Yoash.
Yes.
You said that Disney conformed to Trump's demands, but in your model, Trump would be the one making the demands as he's the one who's funding this NGO.
Sorry, I would just want to make something very clear about our issue. We are not directly funded as a government branch. We are funded by government donations and private donations. Private donations are also by independent journalists, independent people that value unbiased and important information. Then also, I would like to mention that you said that you mentioned the car crash example, and actually this actually proves our point. Since everyone has a saying, and independent fact checkers are checking the information actively, and there's a pool of people that can report on one information except only one journalist who may as well make a mistake. If you read The Guardian and it's talking about a car crash, it usually only has one specific article. This one specific article may also be biased because nobody will know. If you have 20 different opinions from people who were at that concert, maybe one saw them drunk driving, maybe one says, oh no, actually the police have already released a statement. Maybe another person says that, maybe another person says this. This is also why it differs from Twitter and Reddit and those other pages, because instead of creating a singular post, we create a topic where people actually talk together and discuss about these forums. And the difference between Reddit specifically is that independent fact checkers are fact checking every single information, and they are actually also, and this is kind of like a Wikipedia, but since many young people and many current and even older people in developing countries are increasingly getting their information from sites like Facebook or Twitter or even Instagram, there are many tabloids like The Sun or like the Daily Mail who have been exploiting this in order to actually get more views and push their agendas, which might as well also, which your point was that our site will have more people that will post fake information. They also actually creep onto celebrities. They also actually do true crime documentaries in order to shock people. The difference between traditional media and our thing is that ours is not based on advertising, ours is not based on revenue, ours is based on a non-profit, and this is also different than The Guardian, because we will have multiple insights. We will combine the best of both, while having independent fact checkers and while having a non-biased page.
You know what?
Yes.
For your magic unbiased company, why do you need citizens to be the ones reporting rather than professional journalists?
I want to flip this question around and ask, why do you want large corporations to own the company? Why do you want large corporations to own, for example, ABC? Why does Disney need to own ABC? Because they can afford it? That's a very bad rule, right? That's very bad. If Disney can own anything, if I'm a billionaire and I think, oh, I really think this president's a really great candidate, I'm just gonna buy a newspaper, I'm gonna push my agenda, I'm gonna push this, I'm gonna push that. You can do anything with wealth. If everyone has a chance to access this page, if everyone has a chance to show their opinion, if everyone has a chance to access fact check and also correct information that are not controlled by Elon Musk or any other billionaire or any other big companies, even, for example, The Guardian.
Yeah.
Yes.
If your hypothetical media company is taking in large donations to fund itself, wouldn't it also technically be controlled by large donors who may have political interests?
The difference is that large donations do not directly equal saying in which information gets released. The difference between being a government arm and having government funding is very important, because it's like a college basically. Colleges can, they don't they don't follow like a specific rule set by the government. They are funded by individual students who pay a yearly fee in order to support their professors and in order to support their education facilities. It's the same thing with this platform. It is funded by large companies, maybe. It is also funded by individual donors. Maybe it's funded by actually billionaires who don't want to control a narrative and want free speech. Maybe it's controlled by people who actually want a free social media platform that is not dependent on any other, that is not dependent on a specific president or a specific corporation or anything else. And our goal is basically to create a diverse media landscape which is not controlled by any person, which is not directly dependent. Because if you say they're dependent on some of the donations, yes, but imagine you have donations by 20 or 100 different companies at the same time, or you're owned by a large conglomerate. Which one do you think is more likely to cave in? The House personally believes, the government personally believes that the large corporations, they value for-profit, they value investors, they value all these different things like advertising revenue and other revenue. Our platform would be owned by people for people, would be funded by people for people, and would not allow any big corporation or any political figure to have power in this. Furthermore, it might actually give more people access to unbiased information, especially from countries like, especially from undeveloped countries like Laos or something else, where the political landscape is very dominant and people cannot express their own opinion except on social media. And since many young people get their information from social media, it's important to have an unbiased, not owned by a billionaire, not owned by a conglomerate social media, which at the moment doesn't exist. Reddit, your example, is a for-profit company that actually needs advertising revenue. In order to have advertising revenue, you need to have a very strong algorithm. Algorithms push people in a corner that they're interested in. For example, if you're interested in right-wing ideas, you might be pushed by the algorithm into a right-wing area, which is not fair journalism, which is disinformation, which is wrongful information. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Governor Whip. Let's now welcome Opposition Whip. Here.
Citizen journalism is a poison that infects the pool of actual professional journalism, right? Proposition pushes you this idea that their magic unbiased company is going to fix the world's problems. It's going to give you this perfect narrative of what goes on in the world. I have a few questions to ask them that, these are just a few strategic flaws from their team, right? They come out at first and introduce this idea of this company, right? We think that this model in and of itself is quite problematic because we've asked you a few questions from POIs to our rebuttals and our speeches, but they've mostly gone unanswered, right? First is, why do you need citizens to do the reporting? Why can't this magic company just hire journalists to do the reporting and then they get fact-checked by fellow journalists, right? Why do they need it to be citizens? Because we tell you why it shouldn't be journalists, right? Journalists are just inherently less likely to falsify information. They're less likely to be biased because this is literally their profession. They have been trained in actually giving truthful and positive information that will help society as a whole. Citizens have not. This is just a major flaw with your argument because you just don't tell us why we should support the motion in the first place. This is your job as proposition. You tell us why we should support citizens being journalists rather than your company that you bring up to us, which I also think just cannot exist in the real world, but I'll get onto that later. Second, you just had no engagement with our side. We give you this really big sub, our biggest push in this debate, which is why journalism from citizens is inherently worse than journalism from journalists. I think this is a pretty intuitive argument, so I would have liked some rebuttal, right? But also you just have no impact, right? Because you tell us that these citizen journalists on this magic website, or whatever it is, this corporation funded by the government, which again I think is quite problematic, but you tell us that this is going to magically fix the world's issues where they go away from social media to this website. But you also don't differentiate this website from any other journalism in terms of attractiveness to young people, right? You say that young people are addicted to social media, and social media is bad for journalism. We can agree with you that far, right? But you don't tell us why young people will actually move to this website. You don't tell us, yeah, sure.
The first speaker actually mentioned that it will have a social media profile and it will be active on social media. first
Just
speaker.
because something is active on social media doesn't mean I'm going to go visit their website. Like, New York Times is pretty active on social media, but it doesn't mean that young people are inherently more likely to click on their website just because they see their posts on social media, right? At that point, but then you're conforming to the ideology that you want to get away from. You're saying that social media is bad, but now you're saying you're going to use social media to move people over. But why would people just stay on social media in the first place then? Like, you're like, the logic that you're using just doesn't hold up, right? Next, you just tell us that, okay, again, like, why would people use it? I've already gone through that. But I'd like to go back really quickly to why I think your model just doesn't work, right? You tell us that this is going to be funded by the government at first, fully by the government. You don't give us anything else. But then in third, you come up here and tell us that it's going to be funded by the government along with other corporations. No, thank you. Other corporations and like rich billionaires, right? Okay. So I'd just like to walk you through the life cycle of a journalism company. Think of New York Times as an example. It starts off really small. It starts off like with a few tens or 20 viewers every month. And like it goes through a rough time. It doesn't have funding. It doesn't have money. But then this oil billionaire comes along. He's being slandered in the press. He wants someone to say good things about him. He says, I'll pay you like $500,000 if you write a good article about me, and then I'll keep funding you as long as you keep like making me look good in the press, because that's what he wants. The company wants more funding because that's how they'll grow, right? So at that point, your company just becomes like a worse version because of the citizen journalism, which I told you is inherently bad. And then it just becomes a worse version of already existing media companies, right? Next, you tell us that the government's going to fund it, and then you give us this Trump and Disney example. We already told you that since Trump has already shown that he's willing to like get Disney and these big colleges to conform to his will, why would he not want this media company, which just is like going to make him look good? We also tell you that the government is partisan, right? They want to promote, the inherent goal of the government is re-election. So when a government is controlling this news company by giving them funding, there's inherently like going to push their own will. They're saying like, you said Trump is defunding all of these, you want to give the example of Trump, I can go along with it, right? Trump is defunding all of these massive government institutions that don't necessarily align with him and his ideological views. Why would he not defund this company if they disagree with him? This company inherently has to conform to Trump because they're receiving funding from him. Like, okay, it doesn't even matter how much funding because it's probably going to be a substantial amount, as you told us in first. Now just on to some quick clash analysis, right? The biggest clash in this debate is actually who gets better journalism. We tell you two questions to answer here. First, how much does the quality of journalism decrease on our side of the house? We give you a mega sub in first about how we give you 4 layers, right? We tell you that first, journalists are more easily manipulated because they don't have the backing of a major corporation. Second, journalists are more biased because they don't have the editorial resources that a big journalism corporation has. Third, they're more biased because they're just putting their own personal bias into it and they haven't been trained to fight against bias. And fourth, they're less likely to actually be able to get quality journalism because they have to polarize their information because they don't have as big of an audience, and the only way to get a bigger audience is to make wild claims and attract clicks, right? These are the 4 reasons we told you citizen journalism is bad. These are the 4 reasons that have gone unengaged with throughout this entire debate. And what do you tell us? You give us this model about citizen journalism being put into this magical unbiased website with fact checkers and the government's resources and like the money from billionaires and all these people who want to support it. This sounds really good, except it's just impossible. I told you like twice throughout the speech why this media company would be better if it was done by actual journalists. You don't tell us why the citizen journalists are better than this company just hiring actual journalists who are professionals in their field. Is protected time. But then also we tell you that because they're receiving backing from large corporations, like think of Andrew Cuomo, who ran for mayor in New York. He's backed by billionaires. He conforms to their will. He's like, Trump has given him money, so he just has him in his pocket. That's a reason why the New Yorkers were like kind of done with him and they wanted a new guy. So like that's why that guy got elected. But I digress, right? So we tell you that by inherently having these big billionaire backers, they are going to be conforming to their will. This makes biased news. This makes like less reliable news, and it makes more polarized news. Thus, so proud to oppose.
All right. Thank you, Opposition Whip. Let's now welcome Opposition Reply. Right here.
speaker just said. I think he did a great job of going through this entire argument and pointing out why proposition just really doesn't have an argument in the first place. I'd like to reiterate on his main point is that they don't tell us from the start why they need citizen journalists specifically, or why they can't just increase the current pool of journalists itself if quantity is an issue. Going through their major points, I'd like to reiterate again why their model just simply doesn't work before going on to other classes such as young people in social media and the overall independence of ideas. Again, my third speaker did a great job of this already, going through the issues with their funding and backing. They never tell us why their platform will so magically not have any biases or not have any influence from outside investors. They don't do a very good job of explaining how this is already different from existing models that we already stated are better because they employ certified and educated journalists themselves. Their model is some weird combination of social media, which by the way they contend with throughout their arguments, and independent support, even though we've already brought up existing corporations like The Guardian, etc., etc. Furthermore, we like to point out that we actually do have a greater diversity. There's already an existing diversity of ideas. They're taking traditional media as a solely conglomerate structure, but we've already pointed out there's multiple organizations who do have different values. We've talked about smaller journalism who are perhaps more local, or journalism specifically dedicated to not taking bribes or changing their changing their content to the consideration of their donors. This already exists, and like my third speaker just said, it's better because we don't have citizen journalists. Secondly, on the clash on young people and social media, our side of the house is just extremely confused on Proposition's take on this. Throughout their argument, they say that social media is bad because it is controlled by these huge billionaires and conglomerates, but they also tell us that they want to use social media to get young people engaged in traditional, or to get engaged in news. Right now it's already too late to pick a side, but I think we've already pointed out that even if we do take social media and we do say the algorithm is biased, etc., at least the content they're pushing on our side is vetted and is created by reputable people. And then lastly, I think this is a big issue, biggest clash is the independence of ideas. I think their only claim or perhaps impact they have on their side of the house is that more people will be able to share their ideas on an established platform. Again, this already exists. And again, they don't tell us why we need to listen to these citizen journalists or why citizen journalists on their platform are just so inherently better than citizens posting their views on existing platforms like Twitter or Reddit, etc. And like we already said, we already have this diversity of ideas in smaller news platforms and in op-eds. We're being incredibly generous on their side. We're allowing citizens to come share their thoughts under established journalist platforms. Because we've already stated from my first speech that journalist companies have to adhere to ethical standards. They have a full teams dedicated to posting truthful information and making sure this isn't adding to a greater harm in society, which their side does not either have, or they just have it at a worse quality because it's done by groups of citizens. We just win on our side because reporting is more ethical and has a higher value, which benefits reporting as a whole, including smaller organizations that share diversity of thought on our side. So proud to oppose.
All right, thank you, opposition reply. Let's now welcome government reply to end the debate today. Here.
We believe that we have won as our model allows a greater variety of perspectives and current events, without the impact from big corporations with more power in publishing political agendas. This, as it would only benefit the company rather than allowing individuals to gain fair, unbiased information that wasn't altered to the best interest of the business. And especially to provide a platform similar to a typical social media that provides reliable sources to young people. We're talking about the right for people of all ages to gain a fair and reliable source of information, and the ability to share their views rather than being limited to the ideology of a big company like CNN or BBC. And having donations rather than investments will create a more neutral source of information and eliminate the bias power. Moreover, allowing the public to give input into big companies doesn't eliminate bias, as journalists can still be biased, as we're all human and have our own opinions and views. So why should we allow one journalist or a group of journalists with similar opinions to decide what the public thinks? And moreover, by allowing, you guys mentioned that the companies will allow the public to give their opinions as well, but that doesn't eliminate bias, as companies can still choose to ignore or alter what the public have suggested. And you also fail to fix the status quo where big companies have the power to be biased and alter the political agenda. Thank you.